The rain pounded on the glass windows, and the thunder shook the ground beneath my feet. A single lamp glowed in the vast hallway, casting a long shadow of a man who stood alone. In that moment, he looked haunted by secrets too big for his heart. This was the same man who, a few years earlier, had signed a contract that changed both his life and the life of the woman he hired. He was a billionaire used to getting what he wanted, but he was not ready for the loneliness that came after getting exactly what he asked for. Although he had more money than he could ever spend, he could not fill the emptiness of his home or the echo in his chest. Every night he heard a small voice calling out, and every night the answer died in his throat. That stormy evening, he paced the corridor with slow, deliberate steps. The heavy curtains blocked out all light from the city below, and the only sound was the muffled roar of thunder and the rain hitting the windows. He pressed his hand against a family photograph that he had hidden away on a small table behind a decorative vase. The picture was one of the few times he had shared space with the mother of his child. She smiled in that photo, a fresh spark in her eyes, her fingers resting protectively on the little bump that would soon become his son. This was the most unsettling part of his life, realizing that his fortune, his grand estate, and his boardroom victories were all worthless compared to a single question from a 5-year-old boy. The question, "Where is she? Why don't I see her?" kept echoing. He could not run from it forever. He had tried to bury it under mountains of cash and expensive distractions, but it followed him like a persistent ghost. And each time his son asked, he found himself torn open all over again, confronted by the decision he had made. It was an agreement on paper, neat and precise, that set a timeline for a motherhood exchange. He had not expected love. He had not expected that the small life he helped create would tug at him so powerfully. He also did not expect he would lie awake most nights, missing her voice and her gentle presence. He never thought a simple contract would lead to this chaos of emotion. If he could turn back time, he might have done it differently. But there was no going back. There was only forward into the storm. Yet, as lightning split the sky, a small ray of hope flickered in his chest. Perhaps, if everything aligned just right, he could find her again. Maybe he could fix what was broken. Still, it was not the right moment to share this hope with his son. The child, a little boy with a shy grin and restless eyes, was now 5 years old. He had begun to notice the absence of his mother more deeply. He saw the other children at preschool hugging their moms at the door. He heard them talk about birthday parties with their mothers. He saw them wave goodbye to caring arms. And so he asked, sometimes quietly, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, "Daddy, where is my mom? Why can't I see her?" His father, who was used to boardroom showdowns and financial triumphs, froze each time. He had no comforting words. All he had were memories of the day he made an arrangement with a determined and loving black woman named Aliyah. She had been the one to carry his child. She had agreed to a contract that, at the time, seemed like the best solution for both of them. Hey everyone, thank you so much for all your love and support. It truly means a lot that you take the time to watch my content. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to like and comment. I want to hear from you. If you love your mother, comment below with, "I love my mother." Let's spread some positive vibes together. She needed financial security. He needed an heir. It was strictly business, or so they both had tried to convince themselves. But the heart had a way of getting involved where it was not invited. By the time the child was born, feelings had tangled into knots, and it became too difficult to face them. So, he had let her leave. Now, years later, he was face to face with the consequences, and it became clear that he could not keep dodging the truth. The older the child got, the more he asked questions. The father was seeing that maybe it was time to find a way to bring them together again, or at least give his son the mother he so deserved. But first, he had to face the fear inside him, fear that she might not want to return, that she might hate him for how he had let her go. This is the story of that man, named Colin Hamilton, and the woman he hired, Alia Jacobs. It is a story of heartbreak and second chances, of a 5-year-old boy's relentless hope, and of love that insisted on rising from the ashes of a cold agreement. Colin Hamilton was not an ordinary billionaire. At 37, he had inherited a family empire that stretched across real estate, technology, and high-level investments. He was smart, sharp, and often described as a workaholic. He did not like to waste time on parties or social gossip. Instead, he spent his days negotiating deals, signing papers, and overseeing the growth of his corporation. Yet, beneath the stern business exterior, Colin was a man haunted by loneliness. His parents had died in a tragic accident when he was young, and he grew up under the guardianship of an uncle who cared more about profit than family bonds. Because of that lonely upbringing, Colin had learned to keep his emotions buried. To him, everything was business. Everything was about goals and results. But around his 35th birthday, doctors told him he had a specific health issue that might prevent him from having children in the future if he did not act soon. He needed to either find a partner and start a family or risk missing his chance. The news shook him more than he expected. He had not considered fatherhood before, but something about the idea of leaving no legacy behind began to prick at his heart. He dated casually, but he could not find anyone he truly connected with. Most women he met were drawn to his wealth and status rather than to him. He wanted his child to be loved for who they were, not as a pawn in a high society game. Time was ticking. That was when his lawyer and friend, Jacob Reed, approached him with a suggestion. "I know it's not the most romantic thing," Jacob had said, "but surrogacy is a solid option, or you could look for someone who is willing to carry your child. If it's purely business, you can set the terms and keep it separate from your private life. Then later, if you meet the right person, you can still have that bond. But at least you'll have your heir, your child, your family line." Colin thought about it. It sounded cold, but he was running out of time. So he contacted an agency that paired potential parents with surrogates or mothers looking for financial security in exchange for carrying and caring for a child for a set period. He wanted someone who would be healthy, responsible, and who genuinely wanted to bring a child into the world. That was when he first learned about Alia Jacobs. She was listed as a potential match through the agency. She was 27, a college graduate. She came from a humble background, grew up in a tight-knit family, but was weighed down by student loans and medical bills for her mother, who was ill at the time. The agency's profile said she was open to surrogacy or a private contract for financial support in exchange for her help in having a child. Colin arranged a meeting. The first time they met, he was sitting behind his large mahogany desk in his penthouse office. She walked in with calm confidence, but also a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. He noticed her beautiful dark curls pulled back in a neat bun, and her warm brown skin that glowed with health. She wore a simple blouse and a knee-length skirt. She carried herself with poise, even though he guessed she was nervous. They talked for over an hour. He explained the nature of his request. He wanted a child. He wanted the mother to live in his home during the pregnancy for health reasons, and he would cover all medical expenses. After birth, the contract stated that the mother would stay with the child for a certain amount of time, 2 years, so that the child would receive proper nurturing. Then, if the mother chose, she could walk away, with a settlement that would provide her financial stability for the rest of her life. Alia listened carefully. At first, she felt uneasy. She never imagined having a child under such formal, rigid terms, but she also realized that this was a way to ensure her family's well-being. Her mother needed better health care, and Alia's salary was not enough to cover the mounting costs. The settlement Colin offered was life-changing. She asked him many questions. What kind of father would he be? Would he be there for the child emotionally? How would they handle disagreements about the child's upbringing? She did not want to bring a child into the world if the father was going to neglect his role. Colin promised to be active and loving. He insisted that he was a serious man, but that he would care deeply for his child and provide every advantage in life. Her final question made him pause. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You are a billionaire. You have the world at your feet." Colin sighed and leaned back. "Because I don't trust easily," he said, "and time is not on my side. I want a child, and I need a stable environment for that child. Emotions are messy. I'm not sure I'm cut out for that. But this," he waved a hand over the contract on the table, "this is clear. We both get what we need, and the child will be cared for. I know it sounds cold, but it is all I have right now." Despite her reservations, Alia decided to go through with it. She was kind by nature, and she felt that Colin was lonely at his core, even if he would not admit it. Also, her family needed help desperately, and this was a one-time chance to save them. So she signed the contract, and they arranged the next steps. When Alia moved into Colin's luxurious estate, it felt like stepping into a different world. The mansion stood on a hill overlooking the city. Tall gates secured the perimeter. The driveway was long enough to hold half a dozen cars. And inside, each room boasted elegant furniture, expensive artwork, and the soft glow of tasteful lighting. At first, Alia felt out of place. She worried she might break something by accident or say the wrong thing, but Colin assured her that she was welcome. He gave her a choice of rooms, and she selected one that was cozy yet still the size of her entire apartment. The staff, including a housekeeper named Maria and a cook named Pierre, were friendly and helpful. They treated Alia with respect, understanding the significance of her role. Every morning, Colin had breakfast alone in the dining room before heading to his office. He would leave her an itinerary of her appointments with the obstetrician, or any specialized nutritionist sessions. Although they lived in the same house, they did not see each other much during the day. But in the evenings, sometimes Colin would knock on her door and ask if she wanted to watch the sunset from the balcony or walk in the garden. In those quiet moments, they found a kind of hesitant friendship. They talked about casual topics, current events, the shows Alia liked to watch, or the volunteer work she used to do at the local community center. Colin mostly listened, appearing intrigued by a life so different from his. He rarely shared anything personal, but once in a while he let down his guard. For example, one evening, Alia and Colin were strolling under the lantern lights in the garden. The air was fresh with the scent of roses. She asked him about his parents, and he paused. Then he spoke softly, describing how he lost them in a plane crash when he was just a teenager. He told her that he had not been close to them, partly because they were away on business trips so often. But he missed them terribly. He admitted he never got the chance to say goodbye. Alia, tears in her eyes, gently squeezed his hand. It was the first time they touched in a way that was not strictly formal. Colin did not pull away. Months passed, and the baby inside Alia grew. Colin was attentive, going to many of the medical checkups, making sure the house was stocked with healthy foods, and providing anything she needed for comfort. He was meticulous about the contract, but he also showed glimpses of genuine care. To Alia's surprise, she found herself looking forward to their evening talks. She admired his intelligence and sense of responsibility. Sometimes she noticed sadness in his eyes. She wanted to reach out, but she remembered the boundaries they set. She was here to fulfill an agreement, not to form an emotional bond that might make things complicated. And yet, nature had its own plans. The baby's little kicks reminded Aliyah that she was bringing a life into the world, a life that would be part of her forever. Meanwhile, she could not ignore that her heart beat a little faster when Colin's gaze lingered on her across the dinner table. She brushed off these feelings, reminding herself that love was not supposed to be part of this deal. On a chilly evening late in her pregnancy, Aliyah felt sharp pains in her lower back. She tried to ignore them, thinking it was just the usual discomfort. By midnight, she knew she was in labor. She called for Colin, who rushed to her side in a panic. He pressed the emergency button, and the medical team on standby arrived swiftly. Colin insisted on riding in the ambulance with her. He held her hand, murmuring words of encouragement. Aliyah's contractions came hard and fast. Every muscle in her body screamed with pain, but she clung to his steady presence. This was no longer a cold contract. This was life happening in real time, with raw emotions and desperate hopes. The labor lasted through the night. By early morning, a new cry filled the hospital suite. Aliyah sobbed in relief as she held the tiny, warm body of a baby boy against her chest. She felt his little heart beating, and she felt an overwhelming surge of love she had never known before. Colin stood by, tears shining in his eyes. He reached out a trembling hand to touch his son's soft cheek, and a rare, unguarded smile broke across his face. They named him Daniel, a name they both chose. It meant, "God is my judge," which Aliyah liked for its sense of protection and purpose. Colin agreed because it sounded strong, yet gentle. The two shared a brief moment of connection as they both gazed at the new life in their arms. Those early days with baby Daniel brought them closer than they had ever expected. Aliyah recovered slowly, and Colin stayed around the house more often, pushing off non-urgent business meetings. He learned how to change diapers, how to hold Daniel correctly, and even sang lullabies in his low, hesitant voice. Aliyah watched him in awe, realizing that behind his billionaire exterior was a man trying his best to be a good father. As the weeks turned into months, they formed a sort of family routine. There were still lines they did not cross. Aliyah's contract stated she would be involved in Daniel's life for 2 years, then she could decide to leave if she wanted to. However, the more time she spent with Daniel and with Calintha, less sure she was that she could simply walk away. She saw a tenderness in Colin that the outside world never saw. He was patient with Daniel, protective and gentle. She also felt Daniel deserved a mother's constant presence. Her maternal instincts screamed that she belonged with this child. Yet, Colin had never mentioned love or anything more than their arrangement. She felt trapped between her growing feelings and the reality of the contract she signed. Around Daniel's first birthday, the warmth of their small family unit started to clash with the cold formality of the original agreement. Colin's board of directors and business partners began pressuring him to get back to work. They wanted his full attention. The company was expanding, and they needed his leadership. Colin grew distant, working long hours again. Aliyah felt alone in the mansion. She took care of Daniel, of course, but she missed the closeness they had shared in those early months. She also noticed Colin's worry. He seemed torn between two worlds, the big corporate empire and the quiet joys of fatherhood. One afternoon, Colin's uncle, Gerald Hamilton, appeared at the mansion. Gerald had raised Colin after his parents' accident, and he remained a looming figure in Colin's life. Gerald was suspicious of Aliyah's presence. He told Colin that it was not wise to keep a stranger so close to the family legacy. He also insinuated that a contract mother, especially one from a different background, could cause scandal or want more money. Aliyah overheard part of this conversation, and it stung deeply. She realized that in the eyes of some, she was just a hired womb, not a person with feelings or worth beyond the contract. She also saw that Colin seemed torn, unable to stand up to his uncle in that moment. That evening, Aliyah confronted Colin in the library, where he often went to escape stress. "Why did you let him talk about me like that?" she asked, voice trembling. "Am I just a contract to you? You promised me respect. You said this child would be loved. But if you can't stand by me in front of your family, what does that say about your promises?" Colin ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "It's not that simple, Aliyah. My uncle holds a lot of power in the company. I can't just shut him out. He's worried about my reputation and the business. He doesn't understand." "Doesn't understand what?" she pressed. Colin paused. His eyes flickered with hidden emotion. "He doesn't understand that I'm trying to build something real here," he said softly. "But I'm also afraid. Afraid of losing everything if I don't handle things right. I never intended to hurt you. I just—" He stopped, swallowing his words. "You just what?" Aliyah asked, her heart pounding. He lowered his gaze. "I need to figure out how to keep Daniel safe, you safe, and my company stable. This is all new to me, and sometimes I feel like I'm failing at all of it." Aliyah felt her anger soften. She understood the pressure he was under, but she also felt that he needed to choose her and Daniel over his uncle's old-fashioned opinions. Still, she nodded and let the moment pass. She realized that love was starting to bloom for her, but Colin was not ready to open that door. When Daniel turned 2, the contract's major clause came into play. Aliyah was free to leave with the settlement. She still remembered the day she signed that document, feeling unsure about the future. Now that moment of choice had arrived, and she was filled with dread. Colin, who was aware of the contract's terms, avoided discussing it. He was busier than ever, finalizing a huge corporate merger. Aliyah feared that if he did not ask her to stay, she would have to go, for her own emotional well-being. She could not live in an in-between state forever. Either he loved her enough to break the contract's boundaries, or he did not. The day before Daniel's second birthday party, Colin came home late. He found Aliyah sitting in the living room, looking at photos of Daniel. Her eyes were red from crying. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. She looked up, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Tomorrow is Daniel's birthday, and after that I'm free to leave. Have you even thought about what you want me to do?" He stood there, silence hanging in the air. Finally, he answered, "I want what's best for Daniel." She gave a sad smile. "And what's best for Daniel is to have a mother who loves him. You know I love him, Colin. You also know that this arrangement was never just business to me. But you have to decide if you want me as part of this family, or if you'd prefer I walk away." Colin's eyes flickered with pain. "I don't want you to leave," he said. "But I also don't know how to handle my emotions. I feel something I don't fully understand, and it scares me. We never planned for this." Aliyah closed the photo album. "Daniel was never just a plan. He's a living soul. And we're humans. We have hearts, Colin. If you can't accept that, I'll sign the final papers and go." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Eventually, he simply nodded, as if asking for more time. Aliyah felt her heart break. She wanted him to fight for her, to tell her he cared, but he remained locked in indecision. The birthday party the next day was full of laughter for Daniel's sake, but underneath, Aliyah and Colin shared tense smiles. She started packing her things that evening. The night was quiet. Daniel slept in his nursery, unaware of the turmoil surrounding him. Aliyah paused, a shirt in her hand, tears falling on the fabric. She felt that she was tearing herself away from her own child. But she also knew she could not stay if Colin refused to open his heart. Morning came, and she was ready to leave. A taxi waiting outside. Colin stood at the door, cradling Daniel in his arms. He looked as though he wanted to speak. Daniel, sensing the tension, started to cry, reaching his little arms toward Aliyah. She took him from Colin for a moment, kissing his forehead. "Daddy," Daniel babbled, still learning words. "Mommy." He used that word for the first time, and it nearly destroyed Aliyah. She clutched the child, sobbing softly. Colin's face broke, tears filling his eyes. For once, he let them fall. "You're his mother," he whispered. I'm sorry. I'm no good with feelings, but I don't want you to leave." Aliyah stared up at him, waiting for more. She wanted him to say that he wanted her in his life, not just as Daniel's caregiver. She needed to hear him say it. But Colin, overwhelmed by emotion, just stood there, tears sliding down his cheeks. He did not reach out. He did not close the distance. Finally, Aliyah gently passed Daniel back to him, turned. Aliyah moved out, renting a small apartment. She used some of the settlement money for her mother's medical care and for some personal expenses. She tried to make her new place feel like home, but she missed Daniel every day. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw his sweet smile, his little hands reaching out for her. She also missed Colin, though she fought against those thoughts. She blamed herself for falling in love with a man who saw everything as a transaction. But a tiny part of her still held out hope that he would come to his senses. Meanwhile, Colin struggled in his mansion. Daniel cried often, searching for Mommy. Colin tried to fill that void, but he was not enough. The staff did their best to care for the child, but they were not his mother. Colin found himself pacing Daniel's room late at night, helpless against the toddler's sobs. He realized that no amount of wealth could replace a mother's love. Work became a distraction, but it only made Colin feel emptier. He signed deals, attended conferences, and put on a show of confidence. Yet, in the quiet of the night, he would remember Aliyah's face the day she left. He recalled the soft way she used to laugh. He remembered how Daniel lit up when she entered a room. He felt haunted by regret. Time crawled. Weeks turned into months. Daniel turned 3, and Colin organized a small party, but it was joyless without Aliyah. The child asked repeatedly, "Where Mommy?" Colin tried to give simple answers, but Daniel did not understand. The older Daniel got, the more persistent he became. One evening, Daniel ran to Colin with a drawing. It was a crayon sketch of a man, a child, and a woman with curls. Daniel pointed at the woman and asked, "Where is she, Daddy?" Colin felt tears burning behind his eyes. He forced a smile and told Daniel that she was away, but one day, maybe she would come back. Inside, he knew that maybe was not good enough. It was then that Colin realized he had to stop hiding behind excuses. He needed to do something to bring Aliyah back, not only for Daniel's sake, but for his own heart. Though he was a billionaire with many connections, Colin was surprised at how difficult it was to find Aliyah once she decided to keep her distance. She had left the mansion, but she had not cut ties entirely. She had a new phone number, which Colin discovered from one of the staff. He called it many times, leaving voice messages, but she never responded. He went to the apartment address he managed to trace, but the landlord said she had moved out. In truth, Aliyah had gotten spooked by how easily Colin could find her, and she relocated for privacy. She was not sure if she wanted him to track her down and re-enter her life, especially if he was still confused about his feelings. But Colin was determined. He knew she still cared about Daniel, and possibly about him too. He just had to show her that he was willing to fight for them now. He hired private investigators, but all leads pointed to the fact that Aliyah was traveling a bit, caring for her mother, and living on her own terms. She had put some of the settlement money into a trust for her mother's care, and she was volunteering at small clinics in less privileged areas. One day, the lead investigator gave Colin a break. She's been spotted helping at a community health fair, he said. It's in a nearby neighborhood. She volunteers there some weekends. Colin wasted no time. He arranged for Daniel to stay with Maria, the housekeeper, for a few hours. Then he drove himself to the location, a small community center in a lower-income part of the city. When he arrived, he saw a line of families waiting for free checkups and medical advice. A group of volunteers in scrubs moved around, offering help and guidance. Then he spotted her, Aliyah, standing near a makeshift clinic table, wearing a bright smile as she comforted a nervous child. Colin felt his heart pound. He had not seen her in over a year. She looked radiant, the same warm aura about her. He approached slowly, unsure if she would welcome him or turn him away. Aliyah noticed him from a distance, and her expression changed. A mix of shock, caution, and a flicker of old affection crossed her face. She excused herself from the child and walked toward Colin, meeting him outside the center's main doors. "What are you doing here?" she asked, arms crossed to hide her trembling. "I needed to see you," Colin said simply. "Daniel misses you. He asks for you all the time, and so do I." Aliyah's lips tightened. "What do you want me to say, Colin? That I miss him too? Of course I do. I miss him so much it hurts." "Then come back," he pleaded. "I know I messed up. I let you walk away because I was too afraid to admit that I love you. But I can't keep lying to myself anymore. We need you. I need you." Tears gathered in Aliyah's eyes. She turned away, looking at the children playing in the yard. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "How do I know this isn't just another impulsive move? You're saying what you think I want to hear. But will you break my heart later, the moment things get complicated?" Colin swallowed hard, stepping closer. "I've spent the last year realizing that my life is empty without you. Daniel's life is missing a piece. I've tried to go on as if money can solve everything, but it can't. I'm done living that way. I'm ready to build a real family, with real love. No more contracts, no more business deals. Just you, me, and Daniel. I'm begging you for a chance to prove it." She studied his face, searching for sincerity. She saw pain and longing, and perhaps a spark of hope. "I need time," she whispered. "I have to protect my heart. And Daniel's too." Colin nodded, relief mixing with worry. "Take all the time you need. But please let me see you again, whatever pace you're comfortable with." Aliyah exhaled, her tense shoulders relaxing slightly. "All right," she said. "I'd like to see him. I'd like to be part of his life, if only as a friend at first. Let's see where this goes." It started slowly. Aliyah and Colin arranged short visits for Daniel. She met them at parks or family restaurants. The first time Daniel saw her after so long, his eyes lit up, and he called out, "Mommy." Aliyah scooped him up, tears flowing as Daniel clung to her. She felt her heart break and heal at the same time. Colin stood nearby, tears shining in his own eyes. They began to spend weekends together, going to the zoo or the aquarium. Daniel was full of wonder, asking Aliyah to point out animals and hold his hand. Colin watched them, a deep ache in his chest, thinking of all the lost time. He wanted to make sure it never happened again. He tried to show Aliyah that he was a changed man. He spoke more openly about his feelings, asked for her thoughts, and tried to lighten his work schedule. He wanted to prove that he could prioritize what truly mattered. Aliyah saw his effort, and her old feelings for him began to resurface. Yet she remained cautious. She remembered how he had let her go without saying the words she longed to hear. She was afraid of being hurt again. Over the next year, they formed a new rhythm. Aliyah stayed in her own place, but she spent several nights a week at Colin's estate, partly for Daniel's sake, partly to see if they could grow closer again. Colin renovated a section of the mansion to create a space just for her, but she chose not to move in permanently yet. Daniel, now 4, was thriving. He was bright, curious, and endlessly energetic. He loved having both parents in his life again, even if they were still figuring out their relationship. He talked non-stop about the outings they had together. At preschool, he would proudly show pictures of Mommy and Daddy. Still, Colin's uncle and a few others in the boardroom did not approve. They worried about scandal, especially since Aliyah had originally been hired under contract. But Colin, finally finding the courage he once lacked, shut down their criticisms. He told them in no uncertain terms that Aliyah was his partner and the mother of his child, and that was final. For the first time, Colin felt a sense of true freedom. He was living life on his own terms, not under the shadow of other people's judgments. Just when it seemed everything was moving toward a happy resolution, life threw a new challenge their way. Aliyah's mother's health took a turn for the worse, requiring a risky surgery. Aliyah found herself overwhelmed with worry, spending more time in hospitals. Colin offered financial support and even flew in a specialist to help, but Aliyah felt guilt about leaning so heavily on his wealth. She worried about losing her independence. In the midst of this, Daniel sensed the tension. He became clingy, refusing to sleep without both parents nearby. One evening, he had a bad dream and woke up screaming for his mother. Aliyah was at the hospital with her mom, so Colin had to comfort the boy alone. Daniel cried, "I want Mommy," and refused to calm down until Colin promised to bring Aliyah home as soon as possible. Aliyah found herself pulled in two directions: her mother's life and death situation and her son's emotional needs. She felt exhausted, guilty, and unsure how to balance everything. Colin stepped up, taking some time off work to help with Daniel and to stay by Aliyah's side at the hospital whenever possible. These weeks were difficult, full of long nights and anxious mornings. But in this crucible of stress, their bond deepened. Aliyah saw Colin's devotion not just to Daniel, but to her mother as well. He visited every day, brought her mother flowers, and assured Aliyah that he was there for all of them. Finally, the surgery day arrived. Aliyah was a nervous wreck. Colin held her hand in the waiting room while Daniel sat on his lap, too young to fully understand but sensing the tension. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. When the surgeon stepped out and told them the procedure was a success, Aliyah collapsed against Colin, sobbing in relief. In that moment, surrounded by the stark white walls of the hospital, Colin kissed her forehead gently, murmuring words of comfort. Daniel giggled, seeing his parents so close. When Daniel turned 5, he became more vocal about everything he noticed. He wanted answers to questions he had bottled up. While he was happy to see both parents in his life again, he was also curious about the past. One evening, as they all sat on the sofa reading a bedtime story, Daniel looked up at his father and asked, "Daddy, why did Mommy leave before?" The question hung in the air, heavy and raw. Aliyah's heart pounded, and Colin's face went pale. Neither had expected Daniel to bring it up so plainly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Colin cleared his throat. He looked at Aliyah, silently asking permission to speak the truth. She gave a slight nod. Colin took Daniel onto his lap. "Well," he began slowly, "Mommy and I had some problems. We didn't know how to talk about our feelings the right way. I was scared of telling Mommy how I really felt, so I made some mistakes. Mommy had to take some time to figure things out. But we never stopped loving you." Daniel listened with wide eyes. "You love Mommy?" Colin glanced at Aliyah, tears glistening in his eyes. "Yes," he said, voice trembling. "I love her, and I love you very much." Aliyah felt her breath hitch. This was perhaps the first time he had said those words out loud in front of their son. She reached over and brushed Colin's hand lightly, a silent show of unity. Daniel seemed satisfied with this answer for now. though he kept looking between them with curiosity. That night, after Daniel was tucked in, Colin and Aliyah found themselves alone in the hallway. Colin turned to her, taking her hands in his. "I do love you," he said softly. "I've been trying to show you, but maybe I haven't said it enough. I don't want you to doubt it anymore." Aliyah's eyes filled with tears. "I believe you," she whispered. "I love you too. I have for a long time." They shared a tender kiss under the dim light, sealing a promise that had been too long in the making. As the months rolled by, Colin and Aliyah settled into a life that finally felt normal. They decided to move slowly, but they did talk about moving in together again. This time, not as part of a contract, but as a real choice based on love and commitment. One sunny afternoon, Colin invited Aliyah and Daniel to the rooftop garden of the mansion. It was a beautiful space filled with blooming flowers, a small fountain, and a view of the city skyline. Colin said he had a surprise for them. Daniel ran around, giggling at the fountain while Aliyah took in the refreshing breeze. Colin guided her to a little seating area, where a table was set with fresh fruit and pastries. Then he kneeled on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Aliyah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Aliyah Jacobs," Colin said, his voice shaking slightly. "The day I met you, I thought we had a simple business agreement, but you changed my life. You made me a father, and you taught me how to love. You've shown me patience, kindness, and devotion. I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Aliyah trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel, sensing the moment, rushed to her side. She knelt down to hug him, then looked up at Colin. "Yes," she whispered, a radiant smile lighting her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel clapped his hands in excitement. Colin slipped the ring onto Aliyah's finger, and they stood up to embrace. For a moment, the world seemed perfect. They planned a wedding that reflected both their tastes. It was neither a huge, flashy affair nor a secret ceremony. They chose a lovely garden setting near a lake, inviting close friends and family. Aliyah's mother, now in better health, was able to attend. Colin's uncle showed up reluctantly, but he kept his disapproval to himself after seeing how happy his nephew was. The ceremony was simple but emotional. Aliyah wore a graceful white gown, her curls framing her glowing face. Colin looked dashing in a tailored suit. Daniel stood between them, holding both their hands. They exchanged vows that spoke of honesty, devotion, and the promise to always choose love over fear. By the time they said, "I do," afterward, they shared a first dance on a small wooden platform by the lake. The sun was setting, turning the sky into shades of orange and pink. Daniel ran around them, laughing. Colin and Aliyah danced slowly, foreheads touching, grateful for the second chance that had come their way. Shortly after they returned from a short family honeymoon, an unsettling letter arrived at the mansion. It was an anonymous note filled with bitter accusations, implying that Aliyah had trapped Colin for his money and that their entire marriage was a sham. The letter threatened to reveal her original contract to the public. Colin's face hardened as he read it. Aliyah stood beside him, her heart pounding. She recalled all her fears about being labeled a gold digger and a contract mother. What if this letter sparked a scandal that destroyed the family they had worked so hard to build? That night, Colin and Aliyah huddled in the library, deciding how to respond. Colin's lawyers could handle defamation cases, but he worried about the stress on Aliyah and Daniel if the media got hold of the story. They had seen how vicious gossip columns could be. Aliyah felt a wave of dread, fearing that she might lose the peaceful life they had only just secured. Days passed. More letters arrived, each one more threatening than the last. Then came a phone call at Colin's office. from a distorted voice demanding money in exchange for silence. It was clear that someone close to the situation, perhaps an ex-employee or a distant relative, was trying to profit from the story of how Daniel came into the world. Colin grew furious. He was determined to protect his family. He hired a team of cybersecurity experts to trace the threats. He also made plans to hold a press conference if needed, prepared to be transparent about the past and defend Alia's honor. The tension built for weeks. Daniel sensed the worry in the adults, though they tried to shield him from it. Alia felt her old nightmares resurface, the fear that she would again be separated from her child and her husband. Finally, the investigators identified the culprit, a disgruntled former staff member who had stumbled upon the old contract papers and decided to blackmail them. With the evidence in hand, Colin confronted the person through his legal team. Threats of heavy lawsuits and potential prison time made the blackmailer back off. The letters stopped. The phone calls ceased. Relieved, Colin pulled Alia and Daniel into a hug one evening. "No one can tear this family apart again," he said firmly. "I won't allow it." Alia buried her face in his chest, letting out a breath she had been holding for too long. She felt safe in his arms, safe in the knowledge that they had overcome yet another hurdle. With the blackmail threat behind them, Colin and Alia focused on living fully as a family. Daniel, now 5.5, bubbled with joy and curiosity. He told anyone who would listen about his mom and dad. He showed his artwork, which often featured the three of them smiling under a big sun. Sometimes he drew additional figures: a grandma, an uncle, a friend, showing that their circle of love was growing. Alia returned to volunteer work, this time with Colin's full support. He donated to the clinics and community centers she cared about. Alia felt proud to stand alongside him, merging her passion for helping others with the resources he could offer. Colin balanced his corporate life with his family life, learning how to delegate tasks so he could be home for dinner. He discovered the joy of reading bedtime stories to Daniel, even if he had to learn how to do all the silly voices. Sometimes, after Daniel fell asleep, Colin and Alia would sit in the quiet living room, talking about future plans or simply enjoying each other's company. They discussed having another child one day, when things were stable and the time felt right. Alia wanted Daniel to have siblings, and Colin agreed. But for now, they were content, cherishing the gift of togetherness. One evening, Daniel climbed into Colin's lap and asked, "Daddy, do you love Mommy forever?" Colin smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. "Yes, son, forever and ever." Daniel turned to Alia. "Mommy, do you love Daddy forever?" Alia kissed Daniel's cheek, then looked at Colin with warmth. "Yes, sweetheart, forever." Daniel grinned, satisfied, and nestled between them. "Good," he said. "No more leaving." Colin and Alia exchanged a look of tenderness over their son's head. They both understood how far they had come from a cold contract to a bond built on genuine affection and respect. The road had been rocky, and they had nearly lost each other, but love found its way. Years later, Daniel would look back on his childhood with pride and gratitude. He would say that his parents overcame a strange beginning, overcame distance and fear, and chose to become a true family. He would smile when he recalled how persistent he had been in asking for his mother, refusing to let her be just a memory. In many ways, Daniel was the glue that kept them coming back to each other, even when everything seemed hopeless. Today, Colin and Alia Hamilton stand as proof that love can arise in unexpected places and that the strongest bonds are forged by the trials endured together. The wealthy man, who once hid behind contracts, and the caring woman who agreed to help him found that, in the end, money could not buy what really mattered. It could not buy the laughter of a child or the warmth of a loving heart. Those were gifts they had to earn, to cherish, and to protect with all they had. And they did. Hey everyone, thank you so much for all your love and support. It truly means a lot that you take the time to watch my content. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to like and comment. I want to hear from you. If you love your mother, comment below with, "I love my mother." Let's spread some positive vibes together.